once again that what I feel is real. I could cry, I could smile, I might lay back for a while. Tell me what would I do if I could feel?
I'm convinced the government was involved at some level. I will never separate the conduct, the attitude of Hoover and the FBI from Dr. King's assassination. I never will do that.
I think one of the most important things that come out in that investigation was that Martin Luther King in Memphis was in a white hotel. And the FBI admitted that they leaked to the press that Dr. King was staying in a white hotel instead of a black hotel. And it was that embarrassment that forced Dr. King to move into the Lorraine Hotel where he was killed.
There are more questions regarding the FBI's role in the assassination of Dr. King. For example, why was Dr. King stripped of his protection just before he was killed in Memphis? Reporter Les Payne and myself interviewed police officer Ed Reddit of the Memphis Police Department, who told how he was mysteriously removed from his security post near Dr. King. However, later, his superior, Chief Holloman, denied doing so.
Why do you feel you were pulled away from your assignment of surveillance that day? Why do you think they pulled you away?
I think because whoever pulled the trigger, I could identify.
I'm trying to find out what it was that impelled some part of the FBI to pursue Martin Luther King with such an obsession. And what I understood that answer to be is, first of all, it was not any suspicions of the commission of a federal crime. None of the literature showed up a single suggestion that Martin Luther King had committed or was about to commit a crime. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir, but at this point, much of what was being done did involve challenges to local laws. And there is a very strong suggestion that King was seen as rallying the lawbreakers and would-be lawbreakers, albeit for a cause that sounded pure. I was looking now in terms of, if we look at what might have gotten the Bureau started. Remember, at the same time, he is extremely critical of the Bureau's own law enforcement efforts. We see throughout these documents and the New Left documents that it is taboo to criticize the Bureau and particularly the director.
Well, was he ever charged with fomenting violence? Did he ever participate in violence? Was it ever alleged that he was about to be violent?
That was the very opposite of his philosophy, Senator.
So that it was neither the fear of commission of a crime or the commission of violence. Was there any serious charge that he himself was a communist?
No such charge ever was made.
So that what was left then was a decision on the part of some person within the FBI that he should nevertheless be pursued. And the basis for that apparently was political. A decision that he was dangerous or potentially dangerous to someone's notion of what this country should be doing, and a further theory that the FBI possessed the ability to enter into this field and to investigate and to intimidate and seek to neutralize and indeed replace a civil rights leader that they thought to be politically unacceptable. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And the tactics they used apparently had no end. Microphonic surveillance of hotel rooms. They included informants. They included sponsoring of letters signed by phony names to relatives and friends and organizers.
What would I do?
They involved even plans to replace him with someone else the FBI was to select as a national civil rights leader. Is that correct?
Yes, that plan didn't get very far.
But it was seriously considered, and Mr. Hoover penned a note to that suggestion commending its authors, did they not?
Yes.
Right. It also included an indirect attempt to persuade the Pope not to see him.
And many other people.
A direct attempt to persuade one of our major universities not to grant him a doctorate degree.
That's correct. After the March on Washington, there was an acceleration. He was defined because of his speech in that demonstration in Washington as the most dangerous and effective leader in the country, and there was a paper battle within the Bureau as to how best to attack him, and he was attacked. After Time magazine named him as Man of the Year, again, the Bureau finds that reprehensible, believes it must attack and destroy. When he was given the Nobel Prize, again, they seek to discredit Dr. King with the persons who welcomed him back from that award. When he began to speak out against the Vietnam War, there's a new crescendo of efforts by the Bureau to discredit and destroy Dr. King.
It is my feeling that the assassination of Dr. King was a part of a conspiracy in the country, and I do believe that some individuals in very high places of our government were involved in this conspiracy. And it is the same conspiracy that eliminated and destroyed President Kennedy, Senator Kennedy, Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, and so
The police are there not to, in our community, not to promote our welfare or for our security and our safety, but they're there to contain us, to brutalize us and murder us, because they have their orders to do so. Police in our community couldn't possibly be there to protect our property because we own no property. They couldn't possibly be there to see that we receive the due process of law for the simple reason that the police themselves deny us the due process of law. And so it's very apparent that the police are only in our community, not for our security, but the security of the business owners in the community, and also to see that the status quo is kept intact. When we first started, we had a police alert patrol, and we would patrol the community. If we saw the police brutalize anyone, we would put an end to this. Usually the police wouldn't brutalize anyone if we were on hand because we were armed, and if the police arrested the individual, we would follow him to the jail and bail the individual out, whether he was a Panther or not. And we would gain many recruits like this. So therefore the community started to say that, well, these people are really concerned about our welfare.
I did not sell nothing. Because every time you see me, you want to harass me, you want to stop me, you want to sell cigarettes. I'm minding my business, officer. I'm minding my business. Please just leave me alone. I told you the last time, please just leave me alone. Please, don't touch me. Don't touch me, please.
Hold on.
Listen, don't touch me, please.
Came over.
Do not touch me.
Damn, man.
All right, stop. Use your hands, buddy.
Where your hand behind your back? I can't breathe.
Once again, police beating up on people.
Back up.
Right here.
Back up, then get on that step.
Okay.
Back up.
All he did was break up a fight. And this is what happens for breaking up a fight. This shit is crazy.
Everybody back up.
For you and also for a family member, has offered his condolences. Can the family find it in their heart to accept it? Would you accept it?
Hell no. The time for remorse would have been when my husband was yelling to breathe. That would have been the time for him to show some type of remorse or some type of care for another human being's life when he was screaming 11 times that he can't breathe. So there's nothing that him or his prayers or anything else would make me feel any different. No, I don't accept his apology. No, I could care less about his condolences. No, I could care less. He's still working. He's still getting a paycheck. He's still feeding his kids. And my husband is 6 feet under. And I'm looking for a way to feed my kids now.
No indictment in the death of Eric Garner. A grand jury in New York City has decided not to charge a white New York City police officer in the death of an unarmed African-American man.
I don't know. I honestly don't know what to say. If comedy is tragedy plus time, I need more time. But I would really settle for less tragedy, to be honest with you. You know, I think what is so utterly depressing is that none of the ambiguities that existed in the Ferguson case exist in the Staten Island case. And yet the outcome is exactly the same. No crime, no trial, all harm, no foul. In Ferguson, at least you had conflicting witness testimony, you had conflicting forensics, you had the specter, at least, of police self-defense. But here, there is none of that. The coroner called it a homicide. The guy's not acting threatening, and we know that, not through witness testimony, unreliable bystanders, but because we are watching it. Someone taped it. A couple of days ago, the White House proposed more cameras on cop vests as a solution to this type of violence. I assume that the solution they're proposing, if implemented, would look something like the Eric Garner case. I mean, maybe, to look at the bright side, we're about to save ourselves a load of money on cop camera vests, but damn. We are definitely...
Black people tend not to understand propaganda. And the reason why we tend not to understand propaganda is because the propaganda channels, the mediums, the conduits, the radio, the television, the newspaper, we tend to just treat as forms of entertainment. We don't see them as military strategy. When there's a movie depicting black people in a negative image, when there's caricatures in the newspaper making jokes about black people, we tend to just see it as political entertainment. We don't see it as laying the foundation before the storm. That's exactly what they did in Wilmington. You always seek to create a context that allows your military campaign to be acceptable. There's always context. You study Adolf Hitler in Nazi Germany. He had a propaganda campaign that lasted over a year before he began to physically oppress the Jews. He had to make sure that the national mindset had been conditioned to accept the extermination to come. In Wilmington, North Carolina, the same exact thing happened years before Nazi Germany. Through the magazines, through the radio, through word of mouth, through stage play, they created negative images of black people in the minds of white folk in case there were any liberals who would have been against what they were going to do. They were slowly able to reform their opinion by constantly repeating negative information about the target population. See, the one thing about the brain that we gotta understand is the creature of repetition. Whoever has the most access to the brain rules the brain. It's all about volume, not quality. The more you tell people that a certain group of people are no good, the more you show images, the more you show sounds, song, poem, dance, projecting negative information about a people, sooner or later, the subconscious begins to get conditioned. Automatically, because you can't turn off the subconscious to what it sees and what it hears. Sound and image, you cannot stop it except to stay away from it. So sound and image are critical to any propaganda campaign because they help lessen the defenses of anyone who may be against what you're trying to do. It's the same thing happening right now. There is a direct assault on the image of the black man and woman internationally. So when mass incarceration, homicide takes place, nobody cares what's happening to black folk because they've already been conditioned to believe that these people are better off dead anyway. So propaganda is the first stage of military warfare. Right now, we're being set up for another extermination campaign. It's going to be worse than what went on in Wilmington, Tulsa, Charleston, Rosewood. It's going to be worse. Whenever the propaganda gets worse, then you know the extermination is going to be that much worse. because you see how far the exterminator had to go in order to condition the people, to prepare them for the carnage to come.
And then I don't know what or how many hit me after that. I just know there's a barrage of swinging and grabbing and pulling for about 10 seconds.
What's running through your head?
What provoked such an aggressive response to really nothing out of the ordinary besides a conversation? My goal when I originally tried to get out of the car was to get out and just talk with him for 30 seconds till backup arrived. And then we could investigate the stealing further. I had reached out my window of my right hand to grab onto his forearm because I was going to try and move him back and get out of the car to where I'm no longer trapped. And when I felt it, I just felt the immense power that he had. I mean, the way I've described it is it was like a 5-year-old holding on to Hulk Hogan. That's just how big this man was.
Hulk Hogan?
He was very large, very powerful man.
You're a pretty big guy.
Yeah, I'm above average. I'm about 210, 215, but you know, from what I've heard, he was around 290. And then as I'm holding him, I see him coming back around with his left hand, and it's in the shape like this, and it comes in through the window and just a solid punch to the right side of my face. I mean, the next thing was, how do I survive? I didn't know.
How do you survive?
Yes, I didn't know if I'd be able to withstand another hit like that. I mean, you hear all the time, one punch and someone's to my right.
Okay, so show us exactly what you did.
I was like this, and I brought my gun up like that. And when I said, get back or I'm gonna shoot you. And then his response, immediately, he grabbed the top of my gun. And when he grabbed it, he said, "You're too much of a shoot me." And when he did that, he had twisted it and put it down into my hip, and I had the barrel dug into the crease of in my left hip. And then I go to exit my car. And when I'm getting out, I use my walkie and I say, "Shots fired, send more cars." And I start chasing after Michael Brown.
You sent that radio message, "Shots fired, send no cars," but nobody got it.
No.
How come?
Found out later my radio during all the altercation, which was down on the side, which is where my portable radio's kept, the channel was changed from 1 to 3.
That moment before the second shot, you guys are staring at each other, and you said there was a look in his eye like something you'd never seen before. You described it as a demon.
It was a very, very intense image he was presenting. I was so shocked by the whole interaction because this was escalated so quickly from a simple request to now a fight for survival. And it still doesn't make sense to me why someone would act in that way and be so mad instantly, so aggressive instantly.
And he then does run away.
Yes, he does.
How far does he go?
I don't know, I mean, around 30, 40 feet.
At that moment, you've called for help.
Yes.
Why not stay in the car? He's running away.
My job isn't to just sit and wait. You know, I have to see where this guy goes. My goal wasn't to arrest him. My goal was to maintain visual on him. And I was worried.
You mean you weren't going to arrest him alone?
Not alone, no. I knew I had backup on the way.
And then he stops?
He does stop.
And the beginning is this. You got an armed man and an unarmed man. The unarmed man is shot 6 to 7 times. One of those may be a re-entry. That's why it may be 6. 6 to 7 times. He unloaded many, many more bullets. Why? He doesn't even have a bruise. Right? It's red. He's got a red mark. I don't see it. And another thing, when he says, it all happened so fast I couldn't think, then later says, I paused and thought, can I legally shoot him? Listen, that doesn't add up. There's so many things that don't add up.
Just before Officer Darren Wilson testified to the grand jury investigating his killing of Michael Brown, the Assistant District Attorney handling the case said this to the grand jurors. I'm going to pass out to you all. You are all going to receive a copy of a statute. It is section 563046, and it says law enforcement officers' use of force in making an arrest. And it is the law on what is permissible, what force is permissible, and when in making an arrest by a police officer. The Assistant District Attorney, Kathy Elizadeh, then handed the grand jury a copy of a 1979 Missouri law that was ruled unconstitutional by the United States Supreme Court in 1985. She was handing them something that had not been law in Missouri during her entire legal career. But it was very helpful to Officer Darren Wilson that the Assistant District Attorney handed the grand jury an old unconstitutional law which said incorrectly that it is legal to shoot fleeing suspects simply because they are fleeing. By handing assistant district attorney dramatically lowered the standard by which Darren Wilson could be judged. She was telling the grand jury with that document that Darren Wilson had the right, the legal right, to shoot and kill Michael Brown as soon as Michael Brown started running away from him. She was telling the grand jury that Darren Wilson didn't have to feel his life threatened at all by Michael Brown. She was taking the hurdle that Darren Wilson had to get over in his testimony and flattening it. She was making it impossible for Darren Wilson to fail in front of this grand jury. She was doing all of that by handing the grand jury a so-called law that has never been the law of Missouri during her entire legal career. The portion of the Missouri law that was ruled unconstitutional says that a police officer is justified in the use of such physical force as he or she reasonably believes is immediately necessary to effect the arrest or prevent the escape from custody. That was ruled unconstitutional by the United States Supreme Court in 1985. It was legal to shoot and kill fleeing suspects in most states until the Supreme Court made it illegal in 1985, and everyone in law enforcement knows that. Everyone except the two assistant district attorneys who were presenting the evidence to the grand jury in one of the most important cases of police use of deadly force in this country since 1985. There is nothing more helpful the assistant district attorney could have done for Officer Darren Wilson right before his testimony, than show that incorrect, outdated, unconstitutional law to the grand jury. The grand jury then listened to Officer Wilson's testimony with the belief that anything he did to Michael Brown would be fully justified legally simply because Michael Brown at some point ran away from Officer Wilson. There was a time when that's all you had to do in America to be legally shot and killed by a police officer, just run away from the officer. In those days, American police were summarily executing people in the streets for suspicion of crimes that, if they were convicted for, they would not have gotten the death penalty, and in many cases not even gone to jail. Kids jumping out of stolen cars and running away from cops could be legally shot in the back and killed in those days for a crime that obviously did not carry the death penalty. There was actually one case of a man who spit on a police officer and then ran away from the police officer and was legally shot and killed by the police officer. Spitting on a police officer was a crime in that state, but it did not carry the death penalty unless you ran away from the officer. The district attorney's office allowed the grand jurors to travel back in time to the good old days of American law enforcement when the cops could shoot people for running away. Before Darren Wilson was born, that's how far back in time they went. The assistant district attorneys did that by using the old unconstitutional law as the window through which these grand jurors would evaluate Darren Wilson's conduct. The grand jury listened to the officer's testimony, believing that according to the law, Michael Brown did not have to pose any kind of threat to Officer Wilson to justify Officer Wilson shooting him dead. Weeks after Officer Wilson testified, several weeks after that, just as the grand jury was about to consider what charges they might vote for, the assistant district attorney, Kathy Elizadeh, knew that she had better amend the record of these proceedings by introducing to the grand jury the real law, the accurate law on police use of deadly force in Missouri. And so she told the grand jury, previously, in the very beginning of this process, I printed out a statute for you that was the statute in Missouri for the use of force to effect an arrest. So if you all want to get those out, what we have discovered, and we have been going along with this, doing our research, is that the statute in the state of Missouri does not comply with the case law. This doesn't sound probably unfamiliar to you, that the law is codified in a written form in books, and they're called statutes, but courts interpret those statutes, and so the statute for the use of force to effect an arrest in the state of Missouri does not comply with the United States Supreme Court cases. So the statute I gave you, if you want to fold that in half, just so that you don't necessarily rely on that, because there is a portion of that doesn't comply with the law. She then handed out to the grand jury a new document explaining the law on police officers' use of force, and then said, that does correctly state what the law is on when an officer can use force and when he can use deadly force in effecting an arrest, okay? I don't want you to get confused, and don't rely on that copy or that print out of the statute that I've given you a long time ago. It is not entirely incorrect or inaccurate, but there is something in it that's not correct. Ignore it totally. The grand juror then asked, the Supreme Court, federal court, overrides Missouri statutes? Now, we all learned the answer to that in high school. It is one word, yes. That is why we no longer have segregated schools in this country. The Supreme Court said it was unconstitutional and illegal to have segregated schools, and that is the only reason states like Mississippi and Alabama and Arkansas and, yes, Missouri no longer have segregated schools. But the assistant district attorney, when asked the simplest question she could possibly be asked by a grand juror, does the Supreme Court override Missouri statutes, couldn't bring herself to say a simple, truthful yes. Instead, she actually said, quote, just don't worry about that. Her full reply, word for word, was, as far as you need to know, just don't worry about that. The other assistant district attorney in the room added, we don't want to get into a law class. America already had a law class on this when Alabama Governor George Wallace stood in the doorway to prevent the first black students from attending class at the University of Alabama because the United States Supreme Court had ruled states' segregation laws to be unconstitutional. The federal government crushed the little, powerless, angry governor of Alabama when he needed to be crushed in that doorway by the righteous power of the United States Supreme Court and the federal government. It doesn't take a law class to explain to a grand juror that, yes, the United States Supreme Court does indeed override Missouri statutes. It takes one word.
But that's the whole
yes.
tragic point.
But that is not the worst, most unprofessional aspect of Assistant District Attorney Kathy Elizadeh's presentation to the grand jury about this law. The very worst part of it is that she never, ever explained to the grand jury what was incorrect about the unconstitutional statute that she had given them and left with them as one of their official papers for weeks and weeks and weeks. You will not find another legal proceeding in which jurors and grand jurors are simply handed a law and then weeks later handed a correction to that law, and then the grand jurors are simply left to figure out the difference in the laws by themselves. That is actually something you would do in a law class. Figure it out by yourself. With prosecutors like this, Darren Wilson never really needed a defense lawyer.
In my line of work, you got to keep repeating things over and over and over again for the truth to sink in, to kind of catapult the propaganda.
Carolina this week, a police officer lost his job for doing his job by subduing an unruly student in a classroom. Now, the spin is that she had her phone out, she didn't want to put her phone away, whatever. I can guarantee you, as a teacher, this wasn't the first time this has happened, second, third, fourth. I guarantee it. This is no innocent little lamb. And when you have one student, just one, in a classroom, disrupting the class, making life hell for the teacher and the other students, it's impossible for other students to learn. Now, I do agree, the cop went too far, but I don't think he should have lost his job over it. I think it's high time we start addressing the root causes of all this, the disrespect of teachers, this Black Lives Matter movement, this perpetual chip on your shoulder against everybody that's not like yourself. It's got to stop. We've got to address the culture.
First of all, let me say that the cop was justified in being terminated, but they should go further. I think the district attorney's office should indict him for assaulting that child. Ms. Box, nobody supports a disruptive student in a classroom because it stops other kids from learning. But what I do have a problem with is men should never deal and handle a woman like the way that cop handled that little girl. To turn that desk over the way he did, grab her around her neck, then grab that child and throw her across the room, that is unbecoming of a man with decent character and conduct. That's unbecoming of the conduct of a police officer. They should have got a school counselor, maybe a therapist on counselor, a therapist on campus with a school counselor, and a mental health officer to come to the school and deal with that child. We don't know what was going on with that kid, but no kid should...
You think that the children of the former slave master are different than the former slave master. And that's your problem.
Do that. All right. I'm not the operation in this deal.
Why do you say somebody's not gonna hurt you? People are getting shot by the police.
Oh shit! Damn!
You see that? You see that? Did you see that?
He kicked him in the chest.
Kicked him in his chest.
Oh my God! That's how we operate. Oh my God! Just said something to put his hands behind his back. That don't mean he got a kick on the ground. You lying, man? I ain't even been around here. You fucking lying. He better tase you, man.
Bro, I got it all, G. I got the whole thing, bro.
You finna get paid, fam. You gonna get paid.
You see you pulling this hair?
When it's all done and over, fam, you gonna get paid.
Hold on, I got it all right here, man.
Oh my God. Oh my God, dude, you gotta be taping this. You gotta be taping this. Oh my God, oh my God.
Hey, y'all be quiet so I can catch the...
Driver stunned as a CHP officer repeatedly punches a woman, and now an investigation.
Inland this afternoon.
Harry, I was out there yesterday. This video is a whole lot clearer. What does it reveal?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, police say they were responding to a disorderly person. Now this video gives us a clearer look at exactly what happened. These are the final moments before 32-year-old Philip White's death this past Tuesday.
Hold on, put your butt up there. I'll do it
A family friend released this video to NBC 10 News just a short time ago. It gives a clear picture of how violent police officers handled White as he laid on the ground. Melita Sims says she grew up with White and is shocked by his death.
He was a caring person. He always was the type to be there to, to protect you.
We asked Violent Police and Cumberland prosecutors to comment about this new video. No one responded on a day when many offices are closed for Good Friday. But a top-ranking law enforcement official and former use of force instructor who is not connected to the case did comment. I asked a 30-plus-year veteran for his observations. Speaking on anonymity, he tells us police appear to have White under control and should have called off the dog immediately. But he says he was most disturbed when he saw one officer do this.
You see what happened here? All of it? All right, I need your information.
Can I see your license, please? Get out of the car! Get out of the car! Get on the ground! Get on the ground!
I just got my license. You think you're my license?
Put your hands behind your back. 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 Put your hands behind your back.
What did I do, son?
Are you hit?
I think so. I can't feel my leg. I don't know what happened. I just grabbed my leg.
Brakes on 866. I need a 1052.
Why did you shoot me?
Well, you dove head first back into your car.
I'm sorry.
Then you jumped back out. I'm telling you, get out of your car.
I'm sorry. I didn't hear 2 words, son.
Hold on a sec.
My license is right here in the crowd. I didn't do it.
Brakes on 866. Shots fired on 1038. I need a 1052 out here. Broad River at the Shell station near St. Andrews. You seatbelt violation, sir.
Seatbelt? I just pulled it off right there at the corner to pull in the gas station.
Well, I got help come to you, okay? I got help come to you.
I'm sorry.
Just sit still, bro. Sit still for me, okay?
I didn't do nothing. The wall is right there. Yeah, dude, this is just happened.
Where's your ID at in here? Negative, I'm 1067. I need EMS.
That's my medical courier, sir. That's my picture ID.
Just hang tight. Just hang tight. Just hang tight.
His leg looks broke. Look at his leg. Look at his leg. That boy's leg looks broke. His leg broke and y'all dragging him like that.
I can't see him. I don't want to go out there. I don't know what's going on. So they're sending.
So you think he's yelling help?
Yes.
All right, what is your number?
Just there's gunshots.
You just heard gunshots?
Yes.
How many?
This one. Jimmy, get
candle. She got caught on fire. My brother got pictures of his baby. She got a bullet in her face. It was no accident.
The family and friends of 7-year-old Ayanna Jones want answers. The little girl was killed over the weekend during a police raid for a murder suspect in Detroit. Reports say officers charged into the home at 1 in the morning. Ayanna was asleep on the living room couch. A woman got into a scuffle with an officer, and his gun went off, shooting Ayanna in the head.
I'm always gonna remember her through her mother and her brothers. It's just sad to see such a waste for no reason. They supposed to be trained for this type of stuff. They came in here and killed my baby.
More cops came rushing the house, and I'm laying there screaming, asking somebody to help my granddaughter, because he just shot her in the head. And he wouldn't even help her. They turned on the light and seen that she had been shot and carried out the house. Oh, yeah, man. Oh, my God. Oh, Jesus. Why you do that? Why you do it? Why you do it? Please tell me why you come in my house like that. Tell me why you came in my house like that. You killed my grandbaby. You killed her and you try to blame me. You know I never touched you, Mr. Weekly. You know I never touched you. You know you wrong. You know you wrong. You wrong. You wrong. She was only 7 years old. She was only a baby, man. She was sleeping and I told y'all, let me get my granddaughter. And y'all didn't even give me a chance. Why y'all do this to me? I get no sleep. I'm sick. I'm sick as hell. I get no sleep. The flashbacks, I wouldn't wish them on nobody in the world, not even you. I wouldn't wish this on no one in the world that had to watch their 7-year-old granddaughter get their brain blown. By the people that are supposed to protect and serve her. You the brain. I watched you first. What? You the brain. You the first one in.
Without factoring in race, okay, without factoring in race, all right? Then we talk about those terms by being uninformed or being misinformed, all right? Now, that's very important because information is always key. Now, these are the statistics. On average, okay?
Okay.
All right. Now, if you listen to what was said in the United States, we will all raise our hands and say we prefer to be convicted here. All right? But if you look at the information, all right, the United States incarcerates people at a higher rate than anywhere else in the world. All right? anywhere else in the world. This is the absolute worst place, all right, to be convicted of a crime. And it's getting worse every day, all right? See, that's what you're confronted with in your generation, all right? Even more so than anywhere else, because there's certainly been ways of restricting people, but prison has not been widely used. It has been disproportionately used, but it has not been widely used, all right? Prisons in America have not been widely used until the 1970s, all right? Up until that time, the number of people in prison stayed around 100,000 or 120,000 people. You go to the 1940s, up until the 1970s, you would be looking at somewhere between 100,000 and 120,000 people, all right? Now, today, all right, today, there are 2 million persons behind bars. That's today. That's a phenomenal incarceration rate. That's phenomenal, all right? To have 2 million people in a country behind bars, all right? Now, what makes this even worse is that over the last decade, while these numbers were going up, 1986, 500,000 people behind bars. 1999, 2 million people plus behind bars, okay? Now, at the same time that you see that increase, all right? At the same time that you have jails going from 500,000 to 2 million people, crime is going down 15%. All right? So you got a 35% increase in incarceration, although more people now are not committing crimes. That should give you some idea of the problem that people face in this country. Now,
inquiry to the matter before the court.
Well, that's what's wrong with the court, Judge. A black man ain't got a chance down here.
I'm black.
Well, you the judge, that don't count. Listen, why don't you arrest some white drivers?
I do.
You do? Well, where are they? Look at all these niggas in here. Look around here. There's enough niggas in here to make a Tarzan movie.
Order in this courtroom.
By just about every measure, life chances for black and Hispanic youth still lag far behind those of the white community. Our kids, America's children, so often are isolated, without hope, less likely to graduate from high school, less likely to earn a college degree, less likely to be employed, less likely to have health insurance, less likely to own a home. Part of this is a legacy of hundreds of years of slavery and segregation and structural inequalities that compounded over generations.
But that's the whole
did not happen by accident.
What would I do?
So we can't be satisfied, are not satisfied, until the opportunity gap is closed for everybody in America.
Once again,
everybody.
What I feel.
Today I want to focus on one aspect of American life.
I could smile.
It remains particularly skewed by race, by wealth.
What would I do?
A source of inequity that has ripple effects on families and on communities and ultimately on our nation. That is our criminal justice system. Now this is not a new topic. I know sometimes folks discover these things like they just happen. There's a long history of inequity in the criminal justice system in America. The United States is home to 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prisoners. Think about that. Our incarceration rate is 4 times higher than China's. We keep more people behind bars than the top 35 European countries combined.
See, back then, the number of killings that are taking place among black and brown people by white people did not exist then because people were property. And nobody was going to kill somebody because you were killing somebody else's property. You see, unless you engage in something that was so emotionally complex for white folks to deal with, like raping a white woman, you know, something short of that, you were not going to be lynched because there was economic value in you. And that's very important because in a capitalist society, everything's about profit. All right? The reason why you're here is about profit, whether you know this or not. All right? You're here because of profit. They would not have built your college if they did not feel like in some way or another your labor was needed out there in society. All right, so that's why you're here, and that's why you have to be taught a certain way, all right, in order to do those things that are important. Now, some of us don't care because we just want a good job, we want a nice house, we want a good car, we want to take 2 or 3 vacations, we want the American dream. So, you know, hey, I'm ready. Here I come. I don't care, I just want a good life. So, you know, and that's reality. But when you look at this, you realize that this is a recent phenomenon. And the reason why it's a recent phenomenon is because there's no economic value anymore in people. You see, if you get shot down on a street corner, you haven't really harmed somebody, all right, because there's no economic value in you. So you're susceptible to being shot down by the police, or you're susceptible to being incarcerated. And you are incarcerated not so much because you committed a crime, you're incarcerated because you're poor, you're incarcerated because you're homeless, you're incarcerated because you abuse substance abuse, all right? You're incarcerated for a number of reasons, all right? Because ultimately you pose a threat to society, all right? Anybody poses a threat to society, anybody who has leisure time and is not going to work every day, all right, is a threat. It's the same thing as it was right after the Civil War. If you were a black person in the South, right after the Civil War, and you were on a street corner one day with a suit on, you were picked up by the sheriff for lottery. You understand that? You were picked up. Now, just to drive this home, I'm gonna give you a real life story. I started law school at the University of Georgia in the 60s. And at that time, I was actually the third person of African ancestry to attend the University of Georgia Law School. All right, so white people were not accustomed to blacks in law school. And the present Chief Justice of the Georgia Supreme Court was ahead of me. He was the second black to be admitted to the University of Georgia Law School. And when he came to the University of Georgia Law School, he was wearing a suit every day. And he was there with whites who had never gone to school with black people. Never. And so his wearing a suit every day prompted one of his fellow students, for lack of a better word, to approach him and say to him, his name was Bob Benham, Bob, I called my father and told him about this Negress who was wearing a suit to school every day. And that was you. I told him that it bothered me to see you in a suit every day, even though I thought you were a nice fellow. And my daddy said it bothered him too, even though he had never met you. And he told me that I should come to you and tell you that if you get out of that suit and wear jeans to school every day, that we will pay for your law school education. Because where he was from in Georgia, the only time that a Negress was ever allowed to wear a suit during the week was when he was either a preacher or was going to a funeral. All right. Otherwise, it was just prohibited. Now, this is 1969. All right. So when this was related to him. So we're not talking about way back, but.
At the World Economic Forum in Davos, the president of the Institute of New Economic Thinking spoke about the fear amongst millionaires over the growing civil unrest that could stem from that inequality. And he talked about how hedge fund managers are already looking for escapes in the event of a major civil uprising.
Police Commissioner William Bratton to establish a new anti-terror strike force.
The unit will be trained in high-tech weaponry to deal with protests, lone wolf attacks, and the new threats posed by terrorists.
It's called the SRG unit. Funding for the new terror strike squad expected to come from both the city and federal Homeland Security grants, so the officers can be trained in heavy arms and the latest tactics.
They'll be equipped and trained in ways that normal patrol officers are not. They'll be equipped with all the extra heavy protective gear.
They are now firing onto the crowd. Ow! Shit! They are firing rubber bullets.
That's right! Look at it! Hey, I got them same rubber cans! Who give a fuck?
They have now fired onto the crowd for a second time. Violence has erupted in the city of Ferguson. They are firing rubber bullets and smoke grenades. The air is thick. Now they are firing them into the neighborhoods, into the back of people's houses. We will continue to broadcast.
As Cochise and Geronimo said, I'm going to give you the truth about the current state of black America, point one. 2, I'm going to analyze it for you. And 3, I'm going to give you the solutions that we can do together to come out of it. Okay? Now, we got a very serious problem in that monopoly game. We're going to have a converging forces, social forces coming across this country. About 8 major forces going to push us into that understructure and that underclass position. And let me talk about 3 or 4 of them right quick. First thing, across this country, you're going to have an increasing amount of conservatism. Now, I want you all to understand up front what conservatism means. So I don't care whoever uses that word, you know what it means. Conservatism is a new code word for anti-blackism. Okay? Except now, a conservative can stand right in your face and tell you and confess that he's a conservative, which means he is a racist, and not tell you he's a racist. Racism, right now, we got racism all over America, and I can't find one racist. And what I'm telling you right now, before my book even hit the market, I'd already predicted in my book that you're going to have a cutback in welfare. I predicted in my book they're going to catch people like in Texaco, and they just caught Avis discriminating against blacks in North Carolina, South Carolina, and they just caught Circuit City, Sam's, Walmart. I knew they were going to try to cut out single-member districts. I knew they were going to go after affirmative action. I knew there were going to be riots all over this country that's coming. I talked about this a long time ago in the book, because that's what conservatism means. Conservatism comes from the root word to conserve. To conserve means to hold on to what you've got, or those who ain't got, as my mother said in a 3rd grade deaf education, you ain't gonna get. That's what conservatism means. And it means nothing else. It means maintain the status quo. It means use every device that you have to give the pretense that what you see is normal. And right now, there's a conservative move in this country, going from the White House across this land to the Congress, that says whatever exists all over this nation and in Los Angeles is normal. They want you to believe that it's normal to go out in Los Angeles and see all the drug abuse and all the crime, all the poverty, and all the suffering of black folk lying and sleeping on the streets, drugged out, doped out. They want you to believe that's normal. That's what conservatism means, maintain the status quo. It also means to reinstitute white authority, white values, so you hear them talk about family values and all these other kind of things. And also white superiority. So when people start talking about they want to go back to be a conservative, you ask them, what are you trying to conserve? When my people don't own anything and you own 100%, what have I got to conserve? When you hear blacks going around screaming about they're black conservatives, you ask them, what are you conserving? Tell me one point in history that you found something that you want to conserve. Don't let people run that game on you about being a conservative. You tell them, fine, you want to tell me what are you conserving? And when my people never had anything, why would they want to be a conservative? So the biggest problem we're going to have is conservatism when it goes across this nation. And we as black folk got to understand, now it's not all whites that are conservative. There is an element that's got everything. They want to make that it's the greed over need. They want to hold on to everything. And so, we're going to have a massive flow. Everybody's going to be talking about conservatism. You're going to see people politically switching, talking about they're moving to the far right. And what we have to do is understand that, and that's going to create major problems in this country. One, you're going to not only see an increasing amount of negative hostility towards black folk, every piece of research in the country tells us that, even from the Jewish organizations, that you're going to see more anti-blackness now and in the future than you've ever seen in the last 60 years since you left the civil rights movement. Two, we see organizations all over the country now, paramilitary groups, Aryan groups, Vipers, Freeman, Skinhead, Baldhead, all kind of groups that are organizing and optimistically expecting and anticipating a major clash in this country between blacks and whites. We've had 28 states in the United States now to pass concealed weapons laws. That's specifically so some of the white contingency groups can carry weapons and arms at all times. That's why you have such a major thrust from the National Rifle Association. That's why they're controlling most of your politicians. That's why you have such a major anti-governmental effort in this country. You hear people say, we want to go back to states' rights. We're anti-government. We want to get rid of the federal government. It's not that they're against government. They know that in history, the only people who've ever saved black folk has been the government, twice, the federal government. And if you eliminate the federal government by downsizing the government, black folk no longer have an ally. And if a clash occurs, you got nobody to come to the rescue a third time to help you. You see, you were pulled out of slavery by the federal government. You were pulled out of Jim Crowism by the federal government. There are contingencies in the country that says the next time there won't be a federal government to pull blacks out. And you hear them talk about their anti-government, that's what they're talking about. They're not against government. And later on you hear me tell about why they're not against government. Because you see, primary wealth in this country, the primary responsibility of government is to move wealth and to move power. And that's how the dominant society got its wealth and its power, by using government. But now they want to make sure black folk don't have access to it. That's why they're anti-affirmative action, but I'll get into all that a little later. But so the biggest thing, one of the biggest things that are going to drive us in this underclass structure will be conservatism. The second thing is that you're going to have an unending influx of immigrants into the country. And that's what Dr. Price is talking about. And nobody, no black politician, no black organization wants to deal with that issue. They will avoid it at all costs, even though in their hearts they know that's one of the biggest problems for black folk. We anticipate in the next 10 to 12 years approximately 86 million Hispanics coming into the United States and 41 million Asians. You have been the majority minority for 400 years in this country. You have been the #2 population for 400 years. You're going to get kicked out of being #2. You're going to go down and become #4. Now, common sense, even a third grade education would tell you, if you didn't get anything when you were #2, you all jumped ahead of me, but anyway, you can guess what you're going to get when you become #4. And the worst part about it is as you descend and go down to #4, those other groups are going to go up. And as they go past you, you're going to have major racial clashes in this country. You're going to have fights all over this country between blacks and Hispanics, blacks and Asians, blacks and poor whites. And black folk cannot fight all these groups. Everybody can not always be against black folk. They know that we are vulnerable and we are defenseless. And we cannot fight those groups. Because you see, they didn't come into this country with the legacies that we are stuck with. Everybody in America has an advantaged position but black folk. But all are in a state of denial. The white power structure in a state of denial. They're pretending that everything that they got, that 100% control and ownership of everything, they got it because they worked hard through a Protestant ethic. That's not how they got it. And you always hear them say, well, what you got to do, you got to work hard. Nobody can work any harder than a slave.